Thank you for that welcome, everybody. So we've got a Secretary of State that's saying things we like to hear, and we've got a debate like a union conference, whatever next. And I'd like to say thank you for the welcome. And I'd like to say how tickled I am to be here as your General Secretary, but I fear trying to impersonate Ken Dodd in his own city on stage really isn't a good thing to do. In any case, I'm following Andy Mellor and the Secretary of State, who are both tough acts to follow. But instead, I'd like to make reference to one of Liverpool's other famous sons, Sir John Moores. He was a man who came from working class roots, and he used some of his wealth that he created in later life to help the people of Liverpool educate themselves and move up the rungs of the social ladder. Liverpool has a university that bears his name in recognition of his good work. He was born in 1896. John Moores was one of 8 children. His father was a bricklayer. He left school at 13 and became a messenger boy for the Manchester Post Office. But he was apparently given the sack for talking back to his superiors. Now that's a rebellious spirit that would be at home in any union. After the First World War, he worked as a telegraph operator for the commercial cable company, which posted him to Waterville in County Kerry, Ireland. He complained about the food that was served where he worked and was elected to run the mess committee. Now, I've got a story for you here. If ever you open your mouth in a trade union environment, you end up on a committee, and Sir John Moores found that out too. He established the Waterville Supply Company to order food from a variety of suppliers instead of just one. So he was able to reduce costs and raise the quality of meals. Now that sounds like a born school business leader to me. He noticed there was no public library around for miles, so he imported books and stationery and set up a shop to sell them to people in the town. He was a man who understood the power of education. With a rebellious spirit and humble beginnings, you might be surprised to learn that when he came back to Liverpool and put down roots here, he served as a Conservative councillor from 1933 to 1940. He was, however, a builder of coalitions, and he worked with Labour politicians on several projects to improve Liverpool. John Moores was a moderniser, he was a great communicator, and he wasn't afraid to take on the establishment when necessary, and he was prepared to work across party lines in order to make a difference. He believed in the power of education as a route out of poverty and to a fulfilling life. And those two things are exactly what we do at the NAHT. For over 120 years now, NAHT has been speaking up for leaders and learners, working collaboratively with governments of every shade to make a real difference. In my first 9 months as General Secretary, I've worked to continue that tradition and bring it alive for the 21st century. And I will continue to do this year and in the years that follow, listening to you, representing you, and protecting you. NAHT is a community of leaders, and membership of our association is a thing to be proud of. I'm certainly proud to be here as your General Secretary, and you've all offered me fantastic support from the start. You're the reason I'm here. Your energy and passion are what spurs me on, and thank you. Now, we're not traditionally a noisy union. We understand that we make the biggest difference by relentlessly working hard in the background. You need look no further than the announcements made by the Secretary of State today to see that that's the right way to do things. Accountability is an essential part of our publicly funded education system, but it's also one of the main drivers of workload. It's a big reason why many talented people leave, and it's often a limiting factor on the ambition of schools. It's absolutely right that there should be only one agency with the remit to inspect schools. Clarity about the standards that are expected is just what we've been calling for. Removing the coasting and floor standards will do much to address the confusion felt by many school leaders. It will be important that the new support standard is set at the right level, and it ensures that high quality, well-funded support gets to the schools that need it most. NAHT has a track record of working with government on improvements to the system, and we look forward to working with them to help define the detail behind these new proposals and make sure that these joint ambitions are realised. What you heard from the Secretary of State today is as a direct result of the work we do behind the scenes on your behalf. But we only hold that kind of authority because you act with integrity yourselves. Your principled stance as leaders in education gives our teams of negotiators the collateral they need to make big policy shifts like the ones we've seen today. We share our successes, we give credit where it's due, and when policy makers make good decisions, we say so. We don't crow about it. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that we're silent when decisions need to be challenged. Far from it. Lately, we've become more vocal on the issue that just won't go away, school funding. We all know that the costs of running a school are not being matched by the amount of money being put in by government. We in this room understand and passionately believe in the power of education to transform lives and lift young people onto bigger and brighter futures. That's why we're here. So we're having to do two things. We have to be bold to capture the public's imagination and to campaign alongside parents for enough money for schools. We've been incredibly successful at this, and I pay tribute to all of you who have taken part in the campaigning work in this area. 2 years ago, school leaders making redundancies would be something that our members would get criticised for. Now there's a greater public understanding that this is just in response to a funding crisis and that school leaders are just doing the very best that they can. Thanks to you, funding is a mainstream issue. I'm happy to trade statistics with anyone on the issue of funding, but statistics and rhetoric cannot hide the real picture of a system in financial crisis. Thanks to you, parents and school leaders are speaking with one voice. Thanks to you, the government is listening. Today we heard the Secretary of State say that he understands that there are many demands placed on schools and they add up to higher costs. He also understands that you are paying out for more things than you used to. Pension and national insurance contributions are adding to your running costs. Now, I take the Secretary of State at his word when he says that he wants to work with us, and I thank him for that commitment, and I certainly look forward to my next chat with him. But bringing costs down is essential. We still have to make sure that we get the overall budget up as well. We need to do everything we can to make sure that new money is released by the Treasury and given to schools without delay. Part of that work is public campaigning, and I want that to continue. Everyone needs to understand that we're campaigning for the success of the children in your care and for the success of the nation in the longer term. This is not a flight of political fancy. It's very difficult for us, with the futures of so many young people in our hands, to understand why government is not just putting more money in. This is not a battle. The language of victory and defeat is unhelpful. So we must continue to work alongside the government and arrive at a funding settlement that matches the common ambition of providing every child with a world-class education. That's in Whitehall, in Westminster, and in Cardiff and Belfast too, for that matter. Public profile, professional persuasion. A dual approach that works across party lines, across ideological divides, and across the nations. My vision for NAHT in the coming years is one that encompasses three things: growth, community, and voice. We're a growing union. As the established support structures for leaders are in retreat, we need to grow faster. The bigger we are, the more we can do to support the profession, to support leaders and the young people in your schools. I want everyone in this room to be signing up new members, spreading the word about NAHT and speaking with pride about the work that we do on behalf of leaders and on behalf of learners everywhere. We are already the largest school leadership association in the country, but if every NAHT member could recruit just one more new person, think of what else we could achieve together. We are not just there in times of trouble, but we're there to support each other through a whole career. I'm delighted to be able to tell you that over 1,000 people have joined us since January this year. As we grow, we need to modernise. We need to find a new way to work together across branches and regions. There are not many spaces left for school leaders to come together, work together for the greater good. We need to create local communities of leaders motivated to come together and find solutions to key issues. There are no reinforcements rushing over the hill to come to your aid. Now, one of the benefits of leadership is that you call the shots. One of the drawbacks of leadership is that it's lonely. But it doesn't have to be lonely. You shouldn't be afraid of shouting for help. School leadership has never been more demanding. We need to talk to each other about our problems and not fear that we're in competition with each other. If you're looking over your shoulder, you're not really in the room. Now, you're the person that everybody in school turns to, so who do you turn to? Who are you going to call? And it's certainly not Ghostbusters. And I'm really pleased I'm talking to an audience of a certain age, because otherwise that wouldn't have even got a smile. My son's in the audience, he won't have a clue what I'm talking about. But the answer is NAHT. NAHT's support for members is truly world class. I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge the hard work of our advice team and our regional officer team. Our advice lines fielded nearly 15,000 member calls last year, and people receive professional advice about the job they do. NAHT is not just there in times of trouble. We come together, we solve problems, and we improve together. We should not be embarrassed about our collective voice. Used judiciously, backed up by evidence, and the quality of the profession we represent, NAHT will continue to be taken seriously. The profession should have the confidence to speak out in order to achieve the very best that we can. Now, anyone in a leadership role is welcome at NAHT, and that's why I'm so delighted we now have we will be announcing an agreement with the Institute of School Business Leadership tomorrow that talks about joint discounts to encourage members to join and a bursary fund to which professionals can apply to for professional development. We also have plans for a joint annual conference in the future. To school business leaders, head teachers, deputies, assistants, middle leaders in our ed section, I would say this: NAHT values are your values. Come and join us. We are creating a strong community of leaders with a powerful voice, and we will always stand up for leaders and learners everywhere. Now, my job is to hear what you have to say and to make sure that your voice is heard. We should take a straightforward and honest approach. We should campaign for high standards. We should campaign for equality and a fair chance for everyone. I believe that we can find solutions for the challenges that are clear for all of us to see. And those challenges are pretty steadfast. They are reflected in our 5 priorities, and we've stuck to our campaign objectives and will continue to do so. Now, they won't change for the next few years. They will evolve. Some things will become more urgent. Other priorities may emerge. But these 5 priorities cover the majority of what we care about. So if anybody asks you what NAHT stands for, there's a mantra that you can easily recite. We will continue to focus on school funding until we see enough money in the system to make a success of the new national funding formula for schools, for high needs, and to pay the dedicated workforce what they are due. We will continue to push for a national strategy for teacher recruitment and retention that recognises your teams as high-status professionals and guarantees enough high-quality teachers and school leaders for every school. We will continue to push for fair methods to hold schools to account. Test and exam data are only part of the picture when judging a pupil's success and of a school's effectiveness. We will continue to argue that a broad range of subjects in the school day is essential so that no young person's opportunities are limited and that every young person is properly prepared for adult life. And we will continue to campaign to make sure that schools are properly supported with mental health and social care, allowing schools to continue their role in promoting pupil well-being and not making up for the cuts to other services. Now, I recognise that those are big ambitions, and our work may never be over. But I want us to be able to show that we're always making progress. In a year's time, when I'm talking to you again, I want to be able to look you in the eye and say that because of our work, the system is better than it was, that we are delivering more for the children in your care. That's our mission. Now, it's really easy to throw bricks at government. Sometimes the throwaway insult is irresistible, but it takes you nowhere. I want to get underneath the problems that have persisted for too long in education and find lasting solutions. That takes stamina, but the profession has stamina. Over many years, school leaders have proved themselves to be fantastically adept at making bad ideas work. Over many years, you've been successful at bringing parents and families and governors along with you. That skill serves us well now as we continue to build a coalition of the concerned and a coalition of the willing. And change will follow. We brought parents and governors and teachers on board by speaking openly and truthfully about our problems. That wasn't a sign of weakness, that's a sign of strength. We want politicians of all colours to come on board now. Many have done so already, but there are more minds to be won over, but all are welcome. I don't see this as a battle to be fought or a fight to be won. It's a solution to be found. School funding is in crisis. Most people see it. Let's find a solution together and then share the success together. Now, one of the greatest privileges of this job is spending time in schools. And you set my world alight. They're just brilliant places to be in. Now, a year ago, I stood in front of you and remarked, who would have thought I would have fallen in love with school leaders, which has haunted me for a while, I have to say. But little did I know how much more deeply I would feel that now, standing in front of you today. You're miracle workers, and society owes you a tremendous and unrepayable debt. I can see why you say education is the best job in the world, because I see what happens when the light comes on in a child's eyes. It's simply infectious. We've got to get this feeling across to graduates and young professionals. We have to convert more of them into the teachers of today and the leaders of tomorrow. And we've got to pay them right as well. We have amazing people in our schools, but we need many more. Late last year, we published our leaky pipeline report. It demonstrated once again how much school leaders were struggling to recruit in 63% of the cases and failing altogether in about 18% of vacancies. Those vacancies are temporary filled posts, which often weigh heavily on our members as senior and middle leaders who have to take up the slack while still worrying about the quality of education that they can deliver in their schools. Now, NAHT is of course a respected voice for middle leaders too. Our middle leader membership is now established and strong. NAHT Edge goes from strength to strength. James Bowen, NAHT Edge Director, covers even more miles than I do. He's emerging as a thought leader in education and a powerful voice for middle leaders. James, thank you for the long days, the late nights, and the time you spend away from home. After years of being told that you are failing, years of high-stakes accountability, and years of brutal intervention, it's no surprise that parts of the profession have lost confidence and status. In the pursuit of self-preservation, your workloads have become intolerable, and we have to re-establish the status of the teaching profession. Now, maybe we never had the status that we deserved, but we've got to get to that point now. Society should properly value the work that you do. People trust you. Teachers and school leaders are regularly in the top 3 most trusted professions amongst voters. And you do command respect. The impact of what you do is felt for years and years. A child in reception today might go on to change the world eventually. You might have a mini John Moores or a John Lennon, a Margaret Aspinall or a Beryl Bainbridge in your classroom right now. But you don't know what that child will go on to achieve in later life. So it's hard sometimes to show the immediate impact of what you do. I often think about TV shows like 24 Hours in A&E, where you see people in mortal danger and then their life is saved in an hour TV show. But you can't do that in education. We have to make sure we get into everyone's psyche and help them understand what education does. I believe it's a route to a fulfilling life. It may surprise you to hear that I love what politicians have to say about social mobility. Absolutely love it, whether it's a Conservative government or a Labour government. The only difference in the ambition is the road from A to B. Lack of opportunity afflicts too many people in this country, and it inhibits social mobility. Now, there's broad agreement now that whatever your background, you should have an equal opportunity to progress compared to the person next to you. But that breaks down really quickly when you get into detail and arguments about grammar schools and selection, for instance. Equality of opportunity is the shared goal. I just wish that we could work back from the objective and ask ourselves how we build a system to achieve that. We need to create systems of accountability that are fair to that objective and don't motivate perverse incentives. And we need to pay people properly in the system too. And we need to fund it properly. We need to create that system working back from an objective, rather than simply saying, here's the amount of money that we've got, talk big, but actually just sharing out a pot of cash that is always too small. I'm interested in what education is truly for. Organisations like the CBI say they're looking for rounded people with rounded skills so that they can interact with one another. Employers need people with social skills and problem-solving skills. Just knowing exactly where to put the comma or recite 8 times 9 is not enough. We need good, rounded individuals, but the breadth of education and the breadth of curriculum that you need is not going to be shown in a PISA table, and it's not going to be shown in the attainment measures that we have now. I don't think we have a shared vision for what the education system should really look like, or what it's for, and that's where we need to start. and then trust you to deliver it. I'm encouraged by what the Secretary of State had to say today. Let's not wait for his permission, though, to create the system. Let's start right now. And don't worry, while that's happening, I'll be there making sure he's as good as his word. With one eye on the future we want to see, it's also essential to get our career strategy right, particularly in a post-Brexit world where our homegrown workforce couldn't be more critical. The government's made a good start, but it's missing a key element to its funding, to its career strategy, and that's funding to deliver it. It sets high expectations and new obligations for secondary schools without any commitment to the resources required to deliver them. I'd like to finish by talking about children. Children don't shout very loud, perhaps except when they're in the classroom, and they don't vote. So who's their advocate? The answer's simple. It's you and the communities that you support. As leaders, it's our responsibility to speak up for them. We've been ringing the alarm bell about the mental health crisis in our schools, about the growing numbers of children and young people who are struggling, and more worrying about how long they have to wait to get help, even when they're in crisis. The government's mental health green paper is a good start, but there just aren't enough resources planned soon enough to turn this around. And I want to be clear here, those resources are for CAM services. The role of schools is to identify where we think children are struggling and refer them to CAMS for support. Teachers are not the ones who should be treating mental health. We should leave that to the experts in their field. We've today also highlighted the huge challenges that exist with high needs funding. We've published a major new report looking at these challenges and some of the likely solutions. Again, it's difficult to get away from funding. We continue to stand up for the rights of the most vulnerable children and young people in our schools. Currently, they're paying too high a price for the real terms cuts in public service budgets, and that's simply wrong. Now, I'm optimistic that we'll get some money in the budget. I don't think we can be ignored any longer. My worry is that whatever we get, it still won't be enough to make up for what we've lost. School leaders will still have to make heartbreaking decisions about where the money is being spent, and those decisions will always rest more heavily on the shoulders of school leaders than they do on politicians. I'd like some more honesty from government about the impact of austerity. As others have said, the impact of nearly 8 years of cuts has not eliminated the deficit. It has merely shifted it onto schools, hospitals and local authorities, seriously disadvantaging those who can least afford it and are least able to speak up for themselves. Education is an essential public service, and one that needs to be funded at a consistently high level if we're ever going to achieve anything as a nation. Instead, education has been subject to a yo-yoing approach where funding has gone up and down, without any thought to the long-term damage this might have on real people and their opportunities. Let me take a moment to explain. Now, my speech started in 1896. Don't panic, you've not been sat there that long, I can promise you. Back then, public spending on education was about 2% of GDP. After wartime, education spending increased rapidly, peaking at 6.5% of GDP in 1975. Funny enough, when I started my education. By 1999, spending was down to 4.3% and then back up to 5.7% in 2010. Since then, it's been in decline, and significantly. Once more at 4.6% in 2016 and heading towards 4% in 2020. That's a level equivalent to the 1950s. That's not building a system for the future. That's a funding argument that's stuck in the past. Even if you believe that this yo-yo economics is the natural order, you still have to argue that education is long overdue a rise. I'm pleased that the new inquiry launched last month by Robert Halfon's Education Select Committee will look into a longer-term, more sustainable settlement for school funding, and NAHT will of course submit evidence. And I hope that I'll be called to speak to MPs as I did on mental health earlier in the year. We have to be serious about this. We're talking about billions of pounds. And if we do get more money, it will certainly look like another big number on paper, and it will look like a good number in a headline. But will it be enough to build the truly great system that we dream about? £1 billion or so just disappears when you look at the total. That's why I've always tried to talk about the impact on individual schools and individual pupils. You've heard Andy explain the realities of life in Blackpool. Each of you have your own tales to tell of the support you've had to withdraw, the activities you've had to cancel, subjects you've had to cut, and the valued colleagues you've had to say goodbye to. We're trying to fund schools and colleges based on a system we have now, but we need to be bolder and put in place the kind of education system that we want to see. In a year's time, we leave the European Union. The children in the education system today are the generation that will ensure that the UK is a success in a post-Brexit world. I don't envy them that task, frankly. The least we can do is provide them with the education and support that they need now. We will be shortchanging the nation in the long term if we don't. I refuse to accept the idea that this generation of young people are mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of politics, unable to influence the unfolding events that surround them. Education is the means they need to transcend our mistakes and make a better job of it than we've done, to be honest. We are approaching the year anniversary of the moment of the DfE finding $1.3 billion from their existing budget and channel it into the frontline schools budget. That money was a lifeline, but we're still adrift. Without more, none of the grander aspirations we might have will ever be possible. And if you want a reason to become an NAHT member, that's it. We need you. We want you to be part of this community where we stand up for what we believe in and we bring others along with us. Now, in a fast-moving society used to instant gratification, we constantly look for silver bullets. Seldom do they really exist. Except in one case, I believe, and that's education. Education is the silver bullet that will end poverty and open equality. It's the silver bullet that will stop the decline in productivity and kickstart our economic success in a post-Brexit world. It's the silver bullet that will lead us away from bigotry and towards harmony. Education is the silver bullet. But silver is a precious metal. If you want to hold it in your hand, you have to be prepared to pay for it. If you want it to shine, you have to refine it. And if you want to make anything beautiful out of it, you have to put it in the hands of master craftspeople. Together, we can create our education silver bullet. Out of crisis comes opportunity, and I'm optimistic with your passion, professionalism and persistence, we will be successful. We need to be bold. We need to act like leaders. We need to put forward our own ideas, and that's what we do everywhere we go. So if you're a policymaker, come and listen to us. And if you're not yet a member, come and join us. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for listening to me.